welcome to the Healing Migraines Naturally podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Leslie Caesar, and I am a licensed naturopathic doctor, former chronic migraine sufferer, and I've dedicated my life to helping other women with chronic migraines restore their health so their body stops generating migraines. They can get off the medication that they never wanted to get on in the first place, and they can do all of this without taking fistfuls of supplements. And eat the food they want to eat too. That's an important one too, not be on restrictive diets. So welcome to the podcast today. Today, I'm really excited to share this with you because I'm celebrating a client of mine named Linda. And Linda, like me, lives in the Midwest. And if you've been living here in the Midwest this winter, we've had quite the wild ride, haven't we? This has been quite the winter. And so, what do they say about the Midwest? Wait 5 minutes and the weather will change. Just a second, the sun's coming out. I'm going to shut these blinds. Okay. So yeah, they say in the Midwest, wait 5 minutes and the weather will change. Boy, have we been experiencing that this winter. So I live outside of Chicago in the Chicago suburbs, and we've had many days where, at noon it's 55 degrees and the next morning you wake up and it's in the teens. So dramatic temperature shifts have been characteristic this winter, and also some pretty severe storms. So I'm recording this in early January, and just the other night we had thunder at night. So it's like, this is not typical. You're having like a thunderstorm in January, right? So it's been quite the winter. Let me just say that as I grip my teeth here. So my client Linda, she also lives in the Midwest, and she's been experiencing these massive temperature fluctuations and storm fronts come through, etc. And Linda is what we call in the migraine community the weather station. So how many of you listening are sensitive to the weather? Oh my goodness, this is just notorious amongst migraine sufferers. So I've worked with so many clients over the years where they call themselves, the human barometer, the human weather station. And Linda definitely falls into this category. She has told me, I know days ahead of time that we're going to get a storm. So, weather is saying it's all clear and it's going to be great. Linda's like, nope, we're going to get a big storm here in a day or two, right? And she's always right. So I'm sure many of you listening have experienced this. So for Linda, if these big temperature changes occur, she is going to be in bed with a migraine, like in bed, real severe migraine. These are some of her most severe migraines are generated with these big temperature shifts. Okay. And storms coming through, like thunderstorms. Okay. So it's interesting because I think, like in the general public, someone in the general public might have a concept that some people don't feel well when a storm comes through. I think a lot of people might be aware of that phenomenon. But amongst migraine sufferers, you definitely have people that are sensitive to storms coming through. But you have a tremendous number of migraine sufferers that are very, very sensitive to big temperature swings. Right? It's 55 one day and it's, 10 degrees the next, which we've been experiencing this year. I am not sensitive to the weather. So everyone has their sort of particular stressors that they are more particularly sensitive to. We really don't know the mechanism behind this. It's something that's just sort of idiosyncratic to the individual. So while me personally, I'm not sensitive to that environmental stressor, I know that this is a very, very real thing, and I've had many clients that are particularly sensitive to this environmental stressor. We call a lot of environmental stressors triggers in the migraine world, right? So what's going on here is when the barometric pressure change is occurring, when that storm is coming through, when the temperature literally changes, okay? These are physical stressors on our body, on everybody's body that's in that particular area, okay? So again, I think in the general public, they might associate, barometric pressure change, that's like a physical stressor, that's like something in the environment that's changing and would put a stress on someone, the pressure is changing. But again, most, lay people, general members of the general public, they're not really thinking about the physical stressor of the temperature fluctuating like that, those big temperature ups and downs. But those are also physical stressors. So if you think about, like, if you were go into a sauna and then go into a cold plunge, right, you're kind of purposely or consciously exposing your body to a big temperature change, and your body has to respond to that big change in temperature between the sauna and the cold plunge, or frankly, just going from room temperature into a sauna, right? You're going to have a significant change in temperature, and that puts a physical stressor on the body. Our bodies are continuously getting bombarded by physical stressors, environmental stressors. So big environmental stressors would be something like, I got in a car accident, I got injured. A big physical stressor would be getting a surgery done, okay? A big physical stressor would be getting the flu, okay? An acute illness, an infection. That would generate a significant physical stressor on our body. Most people realize that, a surgery, an injury, a severe flu or a bronchitis, these are, big stressors, big physical stressors on the body. But we are being bombarded by relatively small environmental stressors all the time, okay? So even a photon of light hitting my retina generates a physical stress on my body. That the wind blowing generates a physical stress on my body, right? A lot of people will get migraines if it's too windy outside, right? So we are being continuously bombarded by relatively small environmental stressors, and we don't even register them. Our brain filters out all of these environmental stressors, or you could call them sensory impressions, right? Because we are just being bombarded by all of these sensory impressions, these relatively minute physical stressors. If we were consciously aware of all of them, that would drive us insane. So the brain is designed to filter out these sensory inputs, these relatively minuscule environmental stressors, but they are still stressors. Even though we're not consciously aware of them, they're still stressors on our body. And so when we're exposed to these stressors, those stressors are going to start to knock us out of balance, out of homeostasis. You could say out of health. So I like to use the analogy that we sort of have this internal compass needle. And when we are in a state of health, our needle is pointing north. We're in the green zone, okay? Our body is not generating symptoms. But these physical stressors from the environment are continuously pushing our needle down towards west. It's our own resiliency and vitality that pushes the needle back up to north and maintains our equilibrium, our homeostasis, our state of health, despite the stressors, okay? So we have this internal resiliency, this internal vitality, but it has to be strong enough to counter the stressors that we are exposed to. Again, in the migraine world, a lot of these things we call triggers. And so we blame the stressor for the migraine. We blame the temperature shift, the pressure change, the wind, the sunlight. We blame that for causing the migraine. But it's not really that. What's happening is the interplay between the stressor and our resiliency and vitality. So what happens is, if you kind of think of this compass, okay, on the compass dial are certain symptom patterns, symptom pictures, symptom profiles. So when the needle falls into a particular symptom zone, our body is going to generate those symptoms. And I have a little zone on my dial called migraine zone. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably do too. So we have that in common. We have a little zone on the northwest side of our dial that says migraine zone. And when our needle gets pushed into that zone, you and I are going to get a migraine. The way we keep it out of the zone is with our own resiliency and vitality, countering the force of the stressor. So, like I say, it's not the stressor alone, it's the interplay between the stressor and our resiliency and vitality. And this is very critical to understand because you can't change the weather, okay? We can't stop the wind from blowing, right? We can't stop the sun from shining. So, what happens to people is because they've been told, oh, you're sensitive to the weather's a trigger for you, better track the barometric pressure, you better stay on top of that weather forecast, you better be checking your phone every day, barometric pressure tracker, you better stay on top of this because, if this happens to you, you're going to get a migraine. Now we have no control over anything. We're just sort of, at the mercy of, the butterfly wings beating in Brazil, and now the wind is blowing here in Chicago. So that sets us up for feeling like we are completely out of control. And then why would we do anything to improve the state here? What is important to realize here is that if my resiliency and vitality is strong enough to counter the stress of the wind, my needle is not going to go into my migraine zone and I'm not going to get a migraine. So while we don't have control over the wind, we do have control over our resiliency and vitality. We can restore our resiliency and vitality. There are natural therapeutics that will add vitality to us. We can take a look at habits that might be draining our vitality, and these can be physical habits or mental and emotional habits that are draining our vitality. So we can add vitality to us. We can also sort of get a gauge as to where our vitality is on a day-to-day basis. So like my vitality is not at the same level every day, and I have generated the ability to kind of get a read on where my vitality is. And if I can detect, oh yeah, today dragging this is not a high vitality day, then I can take action to conserve stressors. Now, I can't control the wind, but I could decide, maybe today isn't the day that I'm going to have that constructive criticism conversation with my husband that might get into a little bit of a conflict. Maybe today I won't do that, okay? Maybe we'll save that one for another day. I can make these decisions. I can conserve stressors. Maybe I'm not going to go, 2-mile walk today. I'm going to go on a mile walk today because I can feel that my resiliency and vitality is a little bit lower. And so I'm going to conserve the stress of physical activity today. This isn't done out of a panic or a fear or a paranoia that I'm going to get a migraine. This is me honoring where my body is on this particular day, in this particular moment, right? And sort of recognizing the reality of where my body is on any particular day and actually honoring the reality of that, okay? So for Linda, she is particularly sensitive to the stress, the physical stress of big temperature changes and storms coming through. So I'm telling you, last week we had a doozy. So she lives east of me, so it comes to me first, right? Because the weather travels from west to east. So it hit me first, and I was thinking about Linda because I was like, okay, this is a doozy, and I know that this is going to get to her in, 12, 14 hours. This is going to be where she is. And so I was thinking about her. And when we jumped on her weekly appointment, I could not wait to hear how she did because she and I have been working together for about 3 months. Now, Linda has had daily excruciating head pain for decades, okay? And we've been working together for 3 months. She's already off some medication. She's still having daily head pain, but the severity is getting noticeably better, and the flaring migraines on top of her daily head pain are becoming less severe. So I suspected that she was going to weather this weather a lot better than she would typically. So I couldn't wait to talk to her. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. So she said, you won't believe it, but that storm came through. You probably got it too. I was like, oh yeah, I've been waiting to hear. And she said, I wasn't in bed. So this is the type of thing, again, normally we're looking at a multi-day migraine flare where she's literally bedridden. You know, she was living a life where she was just toughing it out and white-knuckling it through a lot of pain and, you know, just trying to tough it out as long as possible and until it got so bad that she was literally forced to get into bed. But these weather-related migraines guarantee bedridden. She said, I never had to go to bed. I stayed upright. I could feel it a little bit. I could feel it, but I never had to get to bed. It's not a literal miracle, right? Because our bodies are actually designed to heal and recover when we give our body what it needs. But it seems like a miracle, right? And, you know, Linda said, you know, years ago I gave up tracking things because it just gave me more anxiety knowing what was going to come, right? So she's getting to the point where she's not getting that 1 to 2 day warning that the storm is even going to come, right? And I've seen this with other clients. They're like, we had a storm and I didn't know ahead of time that it was going to happen. That's amazing. That is a major, major milestone. And this is critical also. These types of experiences are critical for people to have so that they can recover from the post-traumatic anxiety that migraines generate, right? Because when we have these types of chronic migraines, and, you know, I used to have this with the sun. I've talked about this on the podcast because my environmental stressor that I was very sensitive to was sunlight. And so I had so many horrible, you know, skullbuster migraines after being out in the sun that if it was a sunny day, I had anxiety. Instead of feeling good that it was sunny, I'm like having anxiety that, am I going to have, you know, am I going to be in the sun too long, etc. Right? We don't want to live like this. We don't want to start having anxiety just because, you know, it's starting to get a little windy. Or we have anxiety because we hear a thunderclap, or that it's, you know, heaven forbid, sunny outside. So as we have these experiences, we can start to heal and recover from this post-traumatic anxiety that is a natural consequence of living with chronic migraines. So I'm so thrilled for Linda. I was waiting for this milestone. You know, normally when I have clients that are sensitive to the weather, normally we have to wait until like the spring to kind of test it out. But yeah, if you're in the Midwest this year in the wintertime, we've had a lot of opportunity to test and see how people are doing. So shout out to Linda. Send Linda some love, everybody. And again, if you're struggling with weather sensitivity, there is hope. There's answers. And reach out to me if this resonates with you. And let's see if I can help you too. The link to do that is in the description. I will see you guys soon.